Welcome, everyone. We are continuing the SAT crash course, and today we're going to work on sentence correction and grammar and filling in the short passages instead of the long passages because it's a very important part of the SAT. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. And we can see this passage about prehistoric printing, right? All right. So paleontologists are using modern technology to gain a greater understanding of the distant past. With the aid of CT scanning and 3D printing, researchers are able to create accurate models of prehistoric fossils. At this point, the writer is considering adding the following sentence. Fossils provide paleontologists with a convenient way of estimating the age of the rock in which the fossils are found. So with the aid of CT scanning and 3D printing, researchers are able to create accurate models of prehistoric fossils. These models have expanded researchers' knowledge of ancient species and swear to advance the field of paleontology in years to come. So should the writer make the addition here? Yes, because it supports the paragraph's argument with important detail. Yes, because it provides a logical transition from the preceding sentence. No, because it is not directly related to the main point of the paragraph. No, because it undermines the main claim of the paragraph. So any thoughts about if we should make this addition here?
C. No, because it's not directly related to the main point of the paragraph.
Right. I think C is the best answer because there's no indication that has anything to do with the rocks in the fossil. So great job. Okay. These models have expanded research. These models have expanded researchers' knowledge of ancient species and swear to advance the field of paleontology in the year to come. And swear and vow and promise and subscribe to advance the field of paleontology in the years to come. What do we think is the best answer choice?
C.
Vow to advance. It's tough, right? What's the difference between a vow and a promise? And swear. I mean, it's tough. These models have expanded researchers' knowledge of ancient species and swear and vow and promise and subscribe. It's not subscribe, right? And swear to advance and vow to advance or promise to advance the field of paleontology in the years to come. The reason D is probably a better answer than C is because of the feeling of hopefulness, right? Like it's promising, it's hopeful that it'll advance the field of paleontology in the years to come. Where vow is more of like an undertaking that you take without hope, I would say. Do you agree or you think it's vow still?
No, I think it's promise. Yeah.
Yeah, and promise to advance. Yeah, it's very close, but these models have expanded researchers' knowledge of ancient species and promise to advance the field of paleontology in the years to come. And vow, just because who's doing it, the models. The models vowing is a little bit off. Usually vowing is something done by a person, not really by, yeah, exactly.
Object.
An object vowing is difficult. I think promise, it's a very tough one, but I think promise is a better answer there. Okay. CT scanners use X-rays to map the surface of a fossil in minute detail, recording as many as 1 million data points to create a digital blueprint. A 3D printer then builds a polymer model, we could just say a P model, based on this blueprint, much as a regular computer reproduces digital documents on paper. So the writer is considering deleting the underlined sentence. So should we keep this next sentence? So CT scanners use X-rays to map the surface of a fossil in minute detail, recording as many as 1 million data points to create a digital blueprint. A 3D printer then builds a P model based on this blueprint, much as a regular computer printer reproduces digital documents on paper. Whereas the head of an ordinary computer printer moves back and forth while printing ink onto paper, the corresponding part of a 3D printer moves in multiple dimensions while squirting out thin layers of melted P plastic. The plastic hardens quickly, and it allows the printer to build the layers of the final model. So keep it because it helps explains why X-rays are used in CT scanners. Keep it because it provides details to illustrate how a 3D printer works. Delete it because it contradicts the passage's information about digital blueprints. Delete it because it creates confusion about how researchers gather data. What do we think is a good answer here?
A.
It explains how X-rays are used in CT scanners. Well, does it do that? Does it explain how X-rays are used in CT scanners? Or does it do what B says? It provides details to illustrate how a 3D printer works, because it says, whereas the head of an ordinary computer printer moves back and forth while printing ink on a paper, the corresponding part of a 3D printer moves in multiple dimensions while squirting out thin layers of melted polymer plastic. So it does provide details to illustrate how a 3D printer works. It doesn't really say anything about X-rays or CT scanners. So it doesn't really help explain anything about them, but it is relevant because the sentence above it was talking about a 3D printer. A 3D printer then builds a polymer model based on this blueprint, much as a regular computer printer reproduces digital documents on paper. Now, this next sentence is going to provide details to illustrate how a 3D printer works. So I think B is the best answer there. For number 4, the plastic hardens quickly. It allows the printer to build the layers of the final model. The plastic hardens quickly. This allows the printer to build the layers of the final model. The plastic hardens quickly, which allows the printer to build the layers of the final model. And the plastic hardens quickly, that allows the printer to build the layers of the final model. Any thoughts?
I think C, because it's if you put like because the plastic hardens quickly, it allows the printer to build the layers of the final model. If you change that with which, is kind of comparing and contrasting it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be which. C is the best answer here because it contrasts it, right? The plastic hardens quickly, which allows the printer to build the layers of the final model. Which allows the printer, not it allows, not this allows. Those wouldn't be, none of them would be complete sentences. The plastic hardens quickly, that allows, this allows, it allows, nothing. It has to be which allows. Good job. Compared with the older ways of modeling fossils, scanning and printing in this way is extremely versatile. One significant benefit of 3D printing technology is its ability to create scale reproductions of fossils. But now 3D scale models can be rearranged with ease, which is a huge boon to scientists. A team led by Drexel University, KL, is making models of dinosaur bones 1/10 the bone's original size in order to learn how they fit together when the animals were alive. So KL is making models of dinosaur bones 1/10 the bone's original size in order to learn how they fit together when the animals were alive. In order for learning how they fit together. So that one is learning, so to learn how they fit together, or no change. What do you think? Of these?
Change.
No change, right? Because the other three just are incorrect.
They
One
just make it
overriding truth about the English language is free of grammatical error. We're looking for the most succinct statement. So D is tempting, but so to learn is not a free of grammatical error. Bones original size, so to learn how they fit together. It doesn't make sense. It has to be in order, in weight and bulk of the fossils, as well as its precise preciseness and fragility. Oh, I'm sorry, it's preciousness and fragility, its preciousness and fragility, their preciousness and fragility, or their preciousness and fragility. Well, it can't be D because D is just incorrect. And it's not going to be it's with the possessive. It's either going to be their or its. So when we're talking about fossils, it's going to be their or its. And is it going to agree in number? Right, fossils. Is fossils an it singular or is it fossils their plural?
Well, fossils was plural, so I would assume it would be plural.
Yes, and let's try
There.
let's try to really learn that today. We're gonna have to match not just, object or person, talking about whether it's an it or a he, she, but also singularity versus plurality, if it's an it's versus a their. And here fossils is going to be plural, so it'll be their, C. In the past, such research was limited by the weight and bulk of the fossils, as well as their preciousness and fragility. In many cases, scientists had to rearrange bones virtually using artist renderings. To make this paragraph most logical, sentence 2 should be placed. Okay, this one is tough. We're going to kind of have to reread the paragraph and think about it. So in many cases, scientists had to rearrange bones virtually using artist rendering. And where could it be? Where it is now or before sentence 1? So compared with older ways of modeling fossils, scanning and printing in this way is extremely versatile. In many cases, scientists had to rearrange bones virtually using artist rendering. After sentence 4. So let's see that. Sentence 4. In the past, such research was limited by the weight and bulk of the fossils, as well as their preciousness and fragility. In many cases, scientists had to rearrange bones virtually using artist rendering. Oh, we're saying sentence 2 should be placed. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The sentence they're trying to place is sentence 2, which is, but now 3D scale models can be rearranged with ease, which is a huge boon to scientists. So that's the sentence. But now 3D scale models can be rearranged with ease, which is a huge boon to scientists. So where it is now, one significant benefit of 3D printing technology is its ability to create scale reproductions of fossils. But now 3D scale models can be rearranged with ease, which is a huge boon to scientists. Okay. Before sentence 1. So, but now 3D scale models can be rearranged with ease, which is a huge boon to scientists. Will we put that right after? Compared with other ways of modeling fossils, scanning and printing in this way is extremely versatile. But now 3D scale models can be arranged with ease, which is a huge boon to scientists. I don't love it. After sentence 4. In the past, such research was limited by the weight and bulk of the fossils, as well as their preciousness and fragility. But now 3D scale models can be rearranged with ease, which is a huge boon to scientists. That one has a good ring to it, right? The reason why is because, but now is contrasting how it used to be. And it says, in the past, right, such research was limited by the weight and bulk of fossils, as well as their preciousness and fragility. But now is contrasting in the past. And therefore, it makes logical sense to put it right there. Or let's see question 5. Let's see sentence 5. In many cases, scientists had to rearrange bones virtually using artist rendering. But now 3D scale models can be arranged with ease, which is a huge boon to scientists. Actually, and this is a great example of like C sounded like a good. Doesn't D look a little bit better, right?
Yes.
Oh shoot. Oh, I have someone in the waiting room. Okay. Doesn't D look a little bit better than C here? Because
Yes.
but now, in many cases, scientists had to rearrange bones virtually using artist rendering. But now 3D scale models can be rearranged with ease. That makes it very clear This is how they had to rearrange them virtually, but now they could rearrange them with ease. So after 5 is probably the best sentence, the best place to put it, right? Yeah, I think D here is the best. And after sentence 5. In many cases, scientists had to rearrange bones virtually using artist rendering. But now 3D scale models can be rearranged with ease, which is you have to consider A, B, C, and D, because C seemed good, but D is even better. Okay. Because CT scanners can map objects that are impossible to excavate, CT scanning and 3D printing can also be used to reproduce fossils that scientists cannot observe firsthand. By contrast, researchers from the museum have relied on this technique, or we'll see, has relied on this technique to study a fossilized skeleton that was la la la. So, by contrast, besides, for example, or nonetheless, because CT scanners can map objects that are impossible to excavate, CT scanning and 3D printing can also be used to reproduce fossils that scientists cannot observe firsthand. By contrast, researchers from the National Museum of Brazil have relied on this technique to study a fossilized skeleton that was discovered protruding from a rock on old Sao Paulo rail site. Or nonetheless, besides, or for example. We have any idea what this one could be? They have relied on this technique. Which technique? The technique that was used to see scanning and 3D printing, right? To observe, to reproduce fossils.
Would it be for example?
So it's kind of an example of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be for example. For example, researchers, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Researchers from the National Museum of Brazil has relied on this technique to study a fossilized skeleton that was discovered. Relied, will relied, or is relying? What's the proper tense here?
If they're currently relying on it, it'd be is relying.
Is relying on this technique.
Can you show the
Or-
beginning of the sentence again?
Yeah, let's look at it closely. By contrast, researchers from the National Museum of Brazil has relied on this technique to study a fossilized skeleton that was discovered protruding from a rock on an old Sao Paulo rail site. The
Would it
fossil was too delicate to be removed, right?
Would it be relied?
Yeah, it's gonna be relied, because if you continue reading, we're talking about the past tense. I mean,
Yeah.
will rely is grammatically correct, and who is relying? Researchers is relying wouldn't work. You know why? Because it says by contrast, researchers, and then from the National Museum of Brazil. That part isn't necessary when you're doing the agreement. We're just looking at the noun, which is researchers, plural, is relying. That wouldn't work. It'd have to be researchers are relying. So D is just incorrect grammar. When you're looking at these sentence correction, the first thing you have to consider is it correct grammar? And if it's incorrect grammar, it can't be the answer. And then you kind of think logically. So I hear what you're saying. Maybe it could have been present tense, but it couldn't have been D. All right. The fossil was too delicate to be removed from the rock. Because of the fossil's delicate nature, the team dug up a block of stone around the fossil and brought it to their lab. With the aid of a CT scanner and a 3D printer, they were able to produce a resin model of the fossil. Which choice most effectively combines the underlined sentences? Okay, so we just have to look at these. The fossil was too delicate to be removed from the rock. Because of the fossil's delicate nature, the team dug up a block of stone around the fossil and brought it to the lab. The fossil cannot be removed from the rock on account of it being too delicate. Moreover, the team dug up a block of stone around it and brought it to the lab. That seems a little chunky, right? The team thought the fossil was too delicate to remove from the rock, and their next decision was to dig up a block of stone around the fossil and bring it to their lab. Again, chunky. The fossil was too delicate to be removed from the rock, so the team dug up a block of stone around the fossil and brought it to their lab. That sounds pretty clean, pretty concise. And then in removing the fossil from the rock, I already hate it. The team found that it was too delicate. Then they dug up a block of stone around the fossil and brought it to their lab. So for number 10, I know I gave away the answer with how I read it, but why do we pick C? Because C reinforces the main idea of English grammar. Free of grammatical error, the best sentence is the most concise. And C is very concise. The fossil was too delicate to be removed from the rock. It's active voice. The fossil was removed instead of, the rock was a place that was too delicate to remove a fossil. That's passive voice. We want to use active voice, and we want to use conciseness. So A and B were chunky. Moreover, and then B was and their next decision. C really just connects it succinctly. All right, let's try 11. Examining the model, the researchers determined that one had found a new species, a 75-million-year-old crocodile. In examining the model, the researchers determined that he or she had found a new species, that they found a new species, or that it found a new species. The researchers determined that who had found a new species for number 11.
They.
That they, because it's plural. Researchers, they. Any questions on that? Researchers have to be plural, they. Simple, okay. 12, all right, new passage. Hooray, more life. Stop them pictures, oh, here we go. Thomas Nast, the crusading cartoonist. When we see stop them pictures, we know that that's the voice of a character who does not speak proper English. Legend has it that the corrupt politician William Boss Tweed once used those words when ordering someone to offer a bribe to Thomas Nast, an artist who had become famous for cartoons that called for reforms to end corruption. As a result, Tweed's attempt to silence the artist failed, and Nast's cartoons, published in magazines like Harper's Weekly, actually played a key role in bringing Boss Tweed and his cronies to justice. Furthermore, Tweed's attempt to silence the artist failed. Therefore, Tweed's attempt to silence the artist failed, or delete it. Stop them pictures. Legend has it that the corrupt politician William Boss Tweed once used those words when ordering someone to offer a bribe to Thomas Nast, an artist who had become famous for cartoons that called for reforms to end corruption. Tweed's attempts to silence the artist failed, and Nast's cartoon. So, furthermore, therefore, as a result, or delete the underlined portion. What do we think could be the answer here?
Therefore.
Therefore, Tweed's attempt to silence the artist failed. Therefore is used to when we arrive at a conclusion. Because it is raining outside, it's going to be wet. Therefore, you should have an umbrella, right? Therefore is like a conclusion that you arrive at based on premise that supported it. What's the premise here supporting it? Legend has it that the corrupt politician Tweed once used those words when offering someone to bribe Thomas Nast, an artist who would become famous for cartoons that called, it's just giving us a statement. I don't think we can use therefore, as a result, or furthermore. And furthermore, I don't think there's a really way to distinguish between therefore and as a result, right? As a result and therefore are pretty similar. So I think the answer is D here, right? Just delete the underlined portion. They just kind of connect together. There's no reason to connect them. Stop them pictures. Legend has it that the corrupt politician William Boss Tweed once used those words when ordering someone to offer a bribe to Thomas Nast, an artist had become famous for cartoons that called for reforms to end corruption. Tweed's attempt to silence the artist failed, and Nast's cartoons published in right? It's not as a result, it's not furthermore, it's not therefore. It's just a continuation of thought. I'm telling you this, now I'm telling you that. I mean, furthermore is not bad, but furthermore is kind of like you've already told us the conclusion, and now you're going to add to it. We're still in the evidence phase. When you go through life and you learn how to frame arguments, evidence, premise, conclusion. This is just all evidence. He's just telling us this is what he did, and these attempts failed. So I think we're going to delete the underlined portion. Which choice most effectively combines the underlying sentences? Let's check it out. There were powerful politician organizations in the 1860s and the 1870s. The organizations were known as political machines and started taking control of the city governments. Let's look at the answer choices. Powerful political organizations in the 1860s and the 1870s started taking control of city governments, and they were known as political machines. Not bad. Known as political machines in the 1860s and 1870s, political organizations that were powerful started taking control of city governments. I don't like the sound of that too much. City governments were taken control of in the 1860s and 1870s, and powerful political organizations known as political machines did so. I don't love that one either. In the 1860s and the 1870s, powerful political organizations known as political machines started taking control of city governments. That one's pretty solid too. Do we have a thought between A and D for number 13? Which is more concise?
I was gonna say
D.
D.
D is more concise, and I'm telling you, that's going to be the way. As long as it's free of grammatical error, D is straight to the point. Okay. These political machines were able to pack legislators and courts with hand-picked supporters by purchasing votes, a form of election fraud involving the exchange of money or favors for votes. So it's pretty concise as it is. Being a form of election fraud, that is a form, or which it is a form. Can we just keep it as it is? Is it concise enough?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just keep it. These political machines were able to pack legislators and courts with hand-picked supporters by purchasing votes, comma, a form of election fraud involving the exchange of money or favors for votes. Perfect, no change. Once a political machine had control of enough important positions, its members were able to use public funds to enrich themselves and their friends. Boss Tweed's TH Group, which controlled New York City in the 1860s, stole more than 30 million. The equivalent of more than 365 million today. All right, nice. So which controlled New York City in the 1860s? Hyphen. Which controlled New York City in the 1860s, comma. Which controlled New York City, comma, in the 1860s, comma. Which controlled New York City in the 1860s, no comma. This is a tough one. Any thoughts for number 15?
B.
Yeah, B. Which controlled New York City in the 1860s, comma, right? This is a classic appositive. You don't need to know what that word is, but who cares? It's just in English, if you have a statement and then in the middle of that statement, that sentence, you want to identify or add an additional detail, you're free to do it in between two commas. Andrew, comma, a very handsome tutor over there. Andrew, comma, a very young man, all jokes, but Andrew, comma, a dog lover, comma, right? You're describing Andrew. You're allowed to do that in the form of a positive. The show last night, comma, which was 3 hours longer than it needed to be, comma, was pretty funny, right? You're just adding a detail in the middle surrounded by commas. So good job. Okay. Tweed had been elected to a single 2-year term in Congress in 1852. T. Hall was so powerful and corrupt that the New York Times commented, "There's absolutely nothing in the city which is beyond the reach of the insatiable gang." So the writer is concerned deleting the underlined sentence. Should the sentence be kept or deleted? Well, let's see how it fits into the paragraph. Once a political machine had control of enough important positions, its members were able to use public funds to enrich themselves and their friends. Boss Tweed's Tammany Hall Group, which controlled New York City in the 1860s, comma, stole more than 30 million, the equivalent of more than 365 million today. Tweed had been elected to a single 2-year term in Congress in 1852. It seems a little bit out of place, right? Kept because it introduces the quote from the New York Times in the next sentence. Kept because it adds a vital detail about Tweed that is necessary to understand his power. Deleted because it blurs the focus of the paragraph by introducing loosely related information. Deleted because it contains information that undermines the main claim of the passage. Any thoughts here? First, should it be kept or deleted? Does it seem like it fits? I don't think it seems like it fits. So it's going to be deleted. And should it be deleted because it blurs the focus of the paragraph by introducing loosely related information? Kind of, yeah, right? Why do we care about a 2-year term in Congress? Or does it contain information that undermines the main claim of passage? It doesn't undermine the main claim of passage. What's the main claim of passage? You know, that they were basically really big political machines. So it doesn't do that. The answer is going to be C there. 17. Tammany Hall was so powerful and corrupt that the New York Times commented, see, this sounds bad already, so we'll change that. Tammany Hall was so powerful and corrupt that the New York Times commented. Tammany Hall was so powerful and corrupt that the New York Times commented, comma. Tammany Hill was so powerful and corrupt that the New York Times, comma, commented. What do we think the answer is to this one?
C?
C.
No. Yeah,
Yeah.
C.
C as in cat. Tammany Hall was so powerful and corrupt that the New York Times commented, comma, there's absolutely nothing, right? Because why is A wrong? Tammany Hall was so powerful and corrupt that that's a misplaced comma in between the that and the the. We'll eliminate A. B. Tammany Hall was so powerful and corrupt, comma, that the New York Times commented, comma. Why do we need a comma in between the corrupt and the that? Again, misplaced comma. There doesn't need to be a comma after the corrupt or the that. C flows nicely. Tammany Hall was so powerful and corrupt that the New York Times commented, and you always put a comma before you put a quotation. Perfect. And then D, again, a misplaced comma after the New York Times. Tammany Hall was so powerful and corrupt that the New York Times, comma, commented, like the New York Times, comma, misplaced. The answer is C. There's absolutely nothing in the city which is beyond the reach of these insatiable gang. Given the extent of Tweed's power, it is remarkable that a single cartoonist could have played such a significant role in bringing down his downfall. Nass cartoons depicted Tweed as a great, big, bloated thief. One of the artist's most famous images showed Tweed with a bag of money in place of his head. One of the artist's most famous and well-known, most famous and commonly known, or most famous commonly known images showed Tweed with a bag of money on his head. What do we think about 18? Is there any reason to change that?
I think no change, yeah.
No change because it's repetitive and redundant. Famous already means well-known, and well-known commonly, again, concise and to the point. With a bag in place of his head. Which choice adds the most relevant supporting information to the paragraph? One of the artist's most famous images showed Tweed with a bag of money in place of his head, and he was depicted as a big bloated thief. Like many other Nass cartoons, that one was published in Harper's Weekly. Head, Nass would later illustrate Tweed's escape from prison. Head, one depiction that omits Tweed's signature hat. Head, an image that perfectly captured Tweed's greedy nature. Another featured Tweed leaning against the ballot box with a caption, "As long as I count the votes, what are you going to do about it?" Which one would support? Nass cartoons depicted Tweed as a great big bloated chef. One of the artist's most famous images showed Tweed with a big bag of money in place of his head. Like many other Nass cartoons, that was published in Harper's Weekly. Head, Nass would later illustrate Tweed's escape from prison. Head, one depiction that omits Tweed's signature hat. And head, an image that perfectly captured Tweed's greedy nature.
E.
D as in dog, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, D as in dog, because we're talking about Tweed being a big bloated thief, and now we're giving a depiction of him that's perfectly capturing his greedy nature. Was it necessary? Not necessarily necessary, but it would have fit. Another featured Tweed leaning against the ballot box with a caption, "As long as I count the votes, what are you going to do about it?" These cartoons were so effective in part because many of the citizens who supported Tweed were illiterate and thus could not read the newspaper accounts of his criminal activities. Nass cartoons, though, widely exposed the public to the injustice of Tweed's political machine. Nass' campaign to bring down Tweed and the Tammany Hall gang was ultimately successful. In the elections of 1871, the public voted against most of the Tammany Hall candidates, greatly weakening Tweed's power. Eventually, Tweed and his gang were persecuted for a number of charges including fraud and larceny, and many of them were sent to jail. Persecuted for a number of charges, persecuted on a number of charges, persecuted with a number of charges, or prosecuted on a number of charges. Anyone catch this? What'd you say?
D.
D.
D is in dog. D is in dog. Yeah, prosecuted. We're prosecuted. Persecuted means discriminated against. Prosecuted means brought to court, right? That was a tricky one. Including fraud and larceny, and many of them were sent to jail. I teach for the bar exam, so I can teach you all about fraud and larceny and these things. But right now, we'll just focus on the grammar, but it's prosecuted. In 1875, Tweed escaped from jail and fled to Spain and unwittingly brought about one final pinnacle for the power of political cartoons. And unwittingly brings about, has brought, or brought about.
No
Escape from
change.
jail. Yeah, no change, right? Because it's brought about and we want to keep it in the past tense. And one final pinnacle for the power of political cartoons. A Spanish police officer recognized Tweed from one Nash cartoons. One final triumph for the power of political cartoons, culmination, apex, or pinnacle.
I'm between triumph and no change.
Any thoughts? He's right. It's one of those two. One final pinnacle. Pinnacle is the same as culmination and apex. Apex, it just means the peak. But triumph has another connotation, which means like a victory, right?
Yeah.
Win.
Yeah. So triumph.
Yeah, one final triumph for the power of political cartoons. A Spanish police officer recognized Tweed from one Nash cartoons. Consequently, Tweed was sent back to jail, and Nash was hailed as the man who toppled the great Tammany Hall machine. All right. So the last passage, questions 23 to 33 are based on the following passages in supplementary material. Crowdfunding is a popular way to raise money using the internet. The process sounds simple. An artist, entrepreneur, or other innovator takes his or her idea straight to the public via crowdfunding website. The innovator creates a video about the project and offers, in exchange for donations, a series of perks, from acknowledgement on a social media site to a small piece of art. Many crowdfunding programs are all or nothing. In other words, the innovator must garner 100% funding for the project, or the money is refunded to the donors. At its best, the system can give creators direct access to millions of potential backers. The homepage of one leading crowdfunding site features, 23. At its best, it's possessive, it's non-possessive, there. So the system, is it a human or is it a thing? And is it plural or is it singular? I guess it doesn't matter if it's a human or a thing, it's a thing, but is it plural or is it singular? And is it possessive or not? What do you think about 23? At its best, the system can give creators direct access to millions of backers.
B.
B, at its best, right? It's not possessive. There's no ownership, but it is singular. The system, it. Excellent. There would be plural, so we definitely reinforced that one today. The homepage of one leading crowdfunding site features a project to manufacture pinhole cameras on a 3D printer. The idea is obviously very attractive. An obscure method of photography may be made available to many with little expense. So how can we combine them? With the idea being obviously very attractive, we already hate this. An obscure method of photography may be made available to many at little expense. The idea is obviously very attractive. An obscure method of photography may be made available to many at low expense. Not bad. An obscure method of photography may be made available to many at low expense, and the idea is obviously very attractive. An obscure method of photography, an idea that is obviously very attractive, may be made available to many at little expense. Which ones do we like or dislike here for number 24?
I like in C and D.
You do like C and D?
Yes.
An obscure method of photography may be made available to many at low expense, and the idea is obviously very attractive. But what idea? The idea, remember, was from the sentence above. The homepage of one leading crowdfunding site features a project to manufacture pinhole cameras on a 3D printer. The idea is obviously very attractive. An obscure method of photography may be made available to many with low expense. So it has to connect that idea, right? And the idea is obviously very attractive. We're losing track of it. An obscure method of photography, an idea that's obviously very attractive, may be made available to many at low expense. I kind of like B still the best. The homepage of one leading crowdfunding site features a project to manufacture pinhole cameras on a 3D printer. The idea, that idea, is obviously very attractive. An obscure method of photography may be made available to many at little expense. Any thoughts about 24? I think A, C, and D mischaracterize the relationship between the claim, the idea is obviously very attractive, and the supporting information about the camera's cost. The claim about the idea's attractiveness is not in addition to the information about the cost. Rather, the information about the camera's cost supports the claim that the idea is very attractive. So yeah, B there. The idea is obviously very attractive. What idea? The idea that manufacturing a pinhole camera on a 3D printer. And that leads into the next sentence, an obscure method of photography may be made available to many at low expense. That was a very tough one. 25, within weeks, the project was 621% funded. In contrast, on the same page, a small Brooklyn performance venue is attempting to raise money for its current season. The venue features works of performance art showcased in a storefront window. Those who have this space considered vital. However, that group may not be large enough. With just 14 days to go in the fundraising period, the campaign is only 46% funded. Therefore, that group may not be large enough. In effect, that group may not be large enough, or as a rule, that group may not be large enough. Or should we keep it, however,
I think
that group
no
may not be
change.
large enough? Yeah, no change, right? However, right? It features works of performance. Those who have seen the space considered vital. However, that group may not be large enough. I think 25 is going to be no change. Artists such as these Brooklyn performers find that crowdfunding exacerbates problems that already exist. Work that is easily understood and appreciated is supported, while more complex work goes unnoticed. Work, comma, that's easily understood and appreciated, comma, is supported, comma, a lot of commas. Work that is easily understood and appreciated is supported, comma. Work that is easily understood, comma, and appreciated is supported. Work that is easily understood and appreciated is supported. We talked about this earlier. Work that is easily understood and appreciated is supported. So at 26, no change is a misplaced comma, right? Work, comma, that is easily, like we don't need that. It should just be B or C. Work that is easily understood and appreciated. But C again is a misplaced comma. Work that's easily understood and appreciated. There's no need for a comma in C or A. It's got to be B or D. But D, rarely on the SAT is it going to be in a positive, because you could just use commas there. Work, comma, and again, work, comma, which is easily appreciated, right? It would be different. I think work that's easily understood and appreciated is supported, comma. We like B here as the best answer?
Yeah.
Yeah, B. At this point, the writer is considering adding the following sentence, so at 27. Okay, so work that's easily understood and appreciated is supported, while more complex work goes unnoticed. Time that could be used creating art is spent devising clever approach to draw the attention of potential contributors. So in between that, he's considering adding crowdfunding tends to attract contributors from a wide variety of professional fields. So work that's easily understood and appreciated is supported, while more complex work goes unnoticed. Crowdfunding tends to attract contributors from a wide variety of professional fields. Does it seem like it's in place or out of place right there? It seems out of place, right? Yes, because it gives more information about the people who donate to crowdfunding campaigns. Yes, because it reinforces the writer's point about the funding of artistic projects. No, because it fails to take into account project funding received from public institutions. No, because it blurs the focus of the paragraph by introducing a poorly integrated piece of information. What do you think is the best answer here?
D.
D, right? It blurs the focus of the paragraph by introducing a poorly integrated piece of information. Why are we interested at all about professional fields and contributors of crowdfunding when here we're talking about the work and the time that can be spent, creating the art? It's very out of focus and it blurs the flow of the paragraph. So 28. Time that could be used creating art is spent devising clever perks to draw the attention of potential contributors. In addition, audiences may contain many free riders that did not make contribution. Conversely, audiences may contain many free riders. However, audiences may contain many free riders, or thus, audiences may contain many free riders. Time that can be used creating art is spent devising clever perks to draw the attention of potential contributors. In addition, audiences may contain many free riders. And here they're talking about exacerbating problems. It's kind of an additional problem, right?
So no change.
These Brooklyn performers find that crowdfunding exacerbate problems that already exist. Here's one problem. Work that is easily understood and appreciated is supported while more complex work goes unnoticed. Another problem. Time that could be used creating art is spent devising clever perks to draw the attention of potential contributors. Another problem, therefore, in addition, is going to keep it. In addition, audiences may contain many free riders that did not make contributions. So no change, right? Because conversely, however, are talking about, opposites, things that would go against what we're saying. And thus, remember, thus is a conclusion. We're not arriving at a conclusion here. We're just adding an additional problem that the Brooklyn performers are finding with crowdfunding. So 28A. 29, free riders, they did not make contributions. It's not correct as it is. In addition, audiences may contain additional free riders not making contributions, who did not make contributions, to not make contributions. What do you think about 29? Free riders, right?
D.
That's a noun. That's an good.
Is it C?
Yes, C, because we have to identify them. Free riders, comma, who did not make, because who did not make the contributions? The free riders. We have to connect the who to the free riders. Free riders not making, free riders to not make, free riders they did not make. None of them make sense. Free riders, comma, who did not make contributions. Excellent. Ironically, the success of crowdfunding may weaken overall funding for the arts if people begin to feel that paying for the art loved by them is someone else's responsibility. Loved by them, paying for the art they love, paying for the art loved by him or her, or paying for the art he or she loves.
They love.
Yeah, they love. It's the most concise. Paying for the art they love. Loved by them is passive. Loved by them is stating the subject second instead of first. We like to do subject and then verb, right? Subject, action. So loved by them is action and then subject. They love is subject and then action. If people begin to feel that paying for the art they love is someone else's responsibility, definitely. One innovative playwright has woven the deficiencies of the system into a crowdfunding model. Though the price for her tickets was higher than that of tickets for comparable shows, it was still affordable to most theater goers, and reflected the real cost of the performance. See, I'm like, this is confusing, but they're gonna tell us why. She presented the total cost for producing her play on a crowdfunding site. Then she divided the total cost by the number of people she expected to attend the performance. The result of the calculation was the minimum donor price, and only donors who paid at least the minimum ticket price were allowed to attend the performance. By subverting the presumption that money used for a project is an altruistic donation, the playwright showed that our work has monetary value to those who enjoy it. the playwright showed that their, her, its work. By subverting the presumption that money used for her project is an altruistic donation, the playwright showed that whose work has monetary value to those that enjoy it? Their work? Whose work is it? Is it their work, her work, or its work?
Their work.
By subverting the presumption that money used for her project, so it's her project, and
Yeah.
the
C.
is singular.
Oh, yeah,
So
see.
C for her, yeah. By subverting the presumption that money used for her project is an altruistic donation, the playwright showed that her work has monetary value to those who enjoy it, because it's she who's talking about her work. It's her project, she's showing her work. And then finally, oh, not finally, to make this paragraph most logical, sentence 2 should be placed where? So where's sentence 2? Though the price for her tickets was higher than that of tickets for comparable shows, it was still affordable to most theater goers and reflected the real cost of the performance. So after sentence 3. So one innovative playwright has woven the efficiencies of the system into a crowdfunding model. She presented the total cost for producing her play on a crowdfunding site. Though the price of her tickets was higher than that of tickets to comparable shows, it was still affordable to most theater goers and reflected the real cost of the performance. The result, then she divided the total cost of the number of people she expected to attend the performance. The result of the calculation was the minimum donor price, and only donors who paid at least the minimum ticket price were allowed to attend the performance. So should it go after 3, 4, or stay where it is now? Or after sentence 5. The result of the calculation was the minimum donor price, and only donors who paid at least the minimum ticket price were allowed to attend the performance. Well, what is sentence 2 even saying? Though the price for tickets was higher than the tickets of comparable shows, it was still affordable to most theater goers and reflected the real cost of the performance. And then sentence 6, by subverting the presumption that money was used for a project is an altruistic donation, she showed her work has monetary value to those who enjoy it. So to be most logical, sentence 2, which says, though the price for her tickets was higher than the tickets of comparable shows, it was still affordable to most theater goers and reflected the real cost of performance. When do we arrive at the price? So she presented the total cost for producing her play on a crowdfunding site. Then she divided the total cost by the number of people she expected to attend the performance. I feel like we should not put it after sentence 3, because 3 and 4 go together so well, right?
I think after 5.
I agree after 5, because we don't want to put after 3, because 3 and 4 go well. Then she divided the total cost by the number of people she expected to attend the performance. The result of the calculation, again, that just flows together. 3 is telling us the presentation. 4 is telling us how you divide the cost. 5 is telling you the result of it. And now we'll say, though the price for her shows was higher, it was still affordable and reflected the real price. And then 6 will say, by subverting the presumption that money used for a project is altruistic, she showed that her work has monetary value to those who enjoy it. So it is going to be after 5. That's a tough one, but I like D there. And then 33, the last one. Oh, well, yeah, I think this will be the last one we do today. Which choice offers an accurate interpretation of the data in the graphs? So an accurate interpretation of data in the graphs. Well, let's just look at the graph real quick. So we have money raised for crowdfunding, mostly on games. Average pledge was mostly for food. So the success rate was mostly for dance. So it's kind of interesting, right? Because just because you had money raised doesn't mean it was successful. And just because you had dollar pledge doesn't mean you're successful. It's kind of something in the middle. Like dance had the least amount of money raised, but it had the highest success rate, right? So the project category with the lowest amount of money raised was also the most successfully funded project category, right? That's true right off the bat. 38 is true, right? D had the lowest amount of money raised, dance, and it had the highest success rate. So A is true. The project category with the highest average pledge amount was also the most successfully funded project category. So the highest pledge amount was food. Food is not the most successful. Dance was. The project category with the lowest average pledge amount was also the project category that raised the most money. So the lowest average pledge amount was publishing. Did publishing raise the most money? No, games did. The project category with the highest average pledge amount was also the project with the most money raised. So highest pledge amount was food. Food was not the most money raised, games was. That's gonna be the answer to that one. Let's see. Yeah. I think, well, are you still out there? Is anyone still out there?
Yeah.
You want to do what the last paragraph, or you want to call it a night?
We can do 'em.
Yeah, let's do it. Why not? Investigative journalism, an evolving American tradition. The recent precipitous decline of print journalism as a viable profession has exacerbated long-held concerns about the state of investigative reporting in the United States. Facing lower print circulation and diminished advertising revenue, many major newspapers have reduced or eliminated investigative resources. Newspapers, the traditional nurturing ground for investigative journalism, have been hit especially hard by the widespread availability of free news online. To survive, investigative journalism must continue to adapt to the digital age. It is not difficult to understand why a cash-strapped, understaffed publication might feel pressure to cut teams of investigative reporters. Okay, so for the sake of logic and cohesion of the paragraph, sentence 3 should be where? So newspapers, a traditional nurturing ground for investigative journalism, have been hit especially hard by the widespread availability of free news online. Where it is now, before sentence 1, after sentence 1, or deleted. Newspapers, a traditional nurturing ground for investigative journalism, have been hit especially hard by the widespread availability of free news online. The recent precipitous decline of print journalism as a viable profession has exacerbated long-held concerns about the state of investigative reporting in the United States. Facing lower print circulation and diminished advertising revenue, many major newspapers have reduced or eliminated investigative resources. Newspapers, the traditional nurturing ground for investigative journalism, have been hit especially hard by the widespread availability of free news online. To survive, investigative journalism must continue to adapt to the digital age. What do we think about 34? After sentence 1, before sentence 1, or where it is now? Newspapers, the traditional nurturing ground for investigative journalism, have been hit especially hard with the widespread availability of free news online. The recent precipitous decline of print journalism as a viable profession has exacerbated long-held concerns about the state of investigating reporting in the United States. Newspapers, the traditional nurturing ground for investigative journalism, have been hit especially hard by the widespread availability of free news online. Facing lower print circulation and diminished advertising revenue, many major newspapers have reduced or eliminated investigative resources. To survive, investigative journalism must continue to adapt in the digital age. I know I read it differently than you answered it, but I think that makes the most sense to put it in the second sentence. Why? Because they talk about newspapers in the second sentence, but they never introduced the concept of newspapers, right? Like facing lower print circulation and diminished advertising revenue, many major newspapers have reduced or eliminated investigative resources. Newspapers, and now you introduce newspapers. It makes more sense to introduce newspapers. Newspapers, the traditional nurturing ground for investigative journalism, have been hit especially hard by the widespread availability of free news online. Facing lower print circulation, diminished advertising revenue, many major newspapers have reduced or eliminated investigative resources. I do think that after sentence 1 is the most logical place for 34, but it's a tough question. All right, 35. It is not difficult to understand why a cash-strapped, understand publication might feel pressure to cut teams of investigative reporters. Their work is expensive and time-consuming. Reporters with a colon, reporters, comma, reporters possessive with a semicolon. It is not difficult to understand why a cash-strapped, understaffed publication might feel pressure to cut teams of investigative reporters. Their work is expensive and time-consuming. What do we think the answer is here to 35? Report, it's going to be B or C, right?
I'm leaning towards C more.
Reporters, comma, their work is expensive and time consuming. or reporters, colon, their work is expensive and time consuming.
Is it colon because it's breaking up the sentences?
Yeah, it's actually going to be a colon. The colon appropriately joins two independent clauses, indicating that the second clause, their work is expensive and time consuming, follows logically from the first. It is not difficult to reporters. Choice C is incorrect because the comma after reporters creates a comma splice. The comma is used without a conjunction to join two independent clauses, right? It's a comma splice there. So it is not difficult to understand why a cash-strapped, understaffed publication might feel pressure to cut teams of investigative reporters, comma, their work is expensive and time-consuming. There's no need for a comma there. It has to be either two independent clauses, right? Because their work is expensive and time-consuming stands alone as a full sentence and is not difficult to understand why a cash-strapped, understaffed publication might feel pressure to cut teams of investigative reporters also stands alone as a complete sentence. Therefore, a comma there would be a comma splice. If that's a new term, it just means placing a comma in between two independent clauses. Instead of doing that, you'll either do a period or a colon or something different, even a dash potentially, but not a comma. Make sense? That's a tough one too. Taking on the public interest, investigative journalism involves original, often long-form reporting, such as on such topics such as illegal activities. Taking on public interest, undertaking in the public interest, overtaking public interest, taking off from the public interest. What do we think is the best figure?
Yeah, no change.
Taking on the public interest. Taking on the public interest. Taking on the public interest. Investigative journalism involves original, often long-form reporting on such topics such as illegal activities, street crime, corporate wrongdoing, and public government. Taking on the public interest. Taking on means confrontational.
What?
I'm taking on this opponent. Mike Tyson has taken on, Tyson Fury. Taking on. It's not going to be that. Overtaking isn't going to be the answer either. It's actually going to be A or B, undertaken in the public interest, right? It's undertaken in the public interest. Investigative journalism involves original long-form reporting on such topics such as illegal activities, street crime, corporate wrongdoing, and political corruption. Undertaken in the public interest. Why? Because the phrase undertaken in appropriately identifies why and for whom investigative journalism is conducted in the public interest. That is to serve the interests of all the people instead of only a few. Choice A is incorrect because taking on the public interest implies that investigative journalism is the adversary of the public interest. That is, takes on or confronts the interests of the ordinary people. Choice C is incorrect because it implies that investigative journalism overpowers or takes control of the public interest. Choice D is incorrect because it is unclear what taking off from the public interest might mean in this context. So, it's not the best answer, undertaken in the public interest, right? I wouldn't write it that way if I wrote it. Undertaken in the public interest, I would say on behalf of the public interest. That would have been the best phrase. But B is the only one that makes sense because A is adversarial, C is overtaking. That's not really a word, right? Overtaking. That's like overpowering. It is a word, but it's like you're overtaken by something. It's not being overpowered by, it's not being confronted by, it's being undertaken in their interest. So A, undertaken in the public interest, investigative journalism often involves original, often long-form reporting on such topics such as illegal activities, street crimes, corporate wrongdoing, and public corruption, such as business scandals, street crime, corporate wrongdoing, and political corruption, such as abuse of government power, street crime, corporate wrongdoing, and political corruption. Or delete. What do we think here for 37? Is it repetitive to
I
say
think
illegal
delete.
activities?
Yeah, delete it
Yeah,
because
it's
like they're all illegal activities. So
and business
Right.
scandal. You say abuse of government power, you say, and illegal activity already say because they're street crime. So it's just repetitive. Such topics such as street crime, corporate wrongdoing, and political corruption. An investigative story involves one or more experienced journalisms dedicating their full energy and the resources of publisher to a piece for a prolonged period of time. Expensive legal battles may ensue. The results of this work, though costly, have helped keep those in power accountable. The exposure by Washington Post reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein of government misconduct in the Watergate scandal resulted in the resignation of President Richard Nixon in 1974. More recently, Seymour Hersh, reporting from New Yorker in 2004, helped publicize the mistreatment of Iraqi prisoners by U.S. personnel at Abu Ghraib during the Iraq War. In these and other cases, exposure from blockades has served as an important blockade to or scolding of malfeasance. Okay, at this point, the writer is considering adding the following sentence. So, reporting from New Yorker in 2004 helped publicize the mistreatment of Iraqi prisoners by U.S. personnel at Abu Ghraib during the Iraqi War. Yes, in 1954, Edward H. Murrow and Fred Friendly produced episodes of CBS television show See It Now that contribute to the end of the U.S. Senator Joseph McCarthy's anti-communist witch hunts. Seems out of place, right? Yes, because it helps clarify that the passage's main focus is on investigations of political corruption. Yes, because it offers an important counterpart to other cases previously described in the paragraph. No, because it gives an example that is both chronologically and substantively out of place in the paragraph. No, because it provides an example that is inconsistent with the passage's definition of investigative journalism. We think C, right? It's just out of place chronologically and substantively. And then finally, and I know there's some more to this passage if you keep scrolling down, but let's just call it a day with this one, number 39, before everyone falls asleep on me. In these and other cases, exposure from reporters has served as an important blockade to or scolding of malfeasance, has served as an important interference to or condemnation of a malfeasance, drag on or reproof of malfeasance, deterrent or rebuke to malfeasance. Exposure from reporters has served as an important blockade to or scolding of malfeasance, interference to or condemnation of malfeasance, drag on or reproof of malfeasance, or deterrent or rebuke to malfeasance.
Is it no change?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say too. This one's kind of weird.
Really tough. It's going to be a deterrent or rebuke, right? In these and other cases, exposure from reporters has served as an important deterrent or rebuke to malfeasance, right? Because the exposure by the Washington Post of government misconduct resulted in the resignation. More recently, Seymour Hersh helped publicize the mistreatment. In these and other cases, exposure from reporters has served as an important deterrent or rebuke to malfeasance, meaning it prevented people from being malfeasant. Interference to or condemnation doesn't really make sense. Blockade or scolding of, like, not really a blockade, but a deterrent or rebuke, meaning like deterring people from being malfeasant or rebuking them, like giving them reason not to be malfeasant. Choice D is the best answer because deterrent and rebuke to appropriately indicate the effect that exposure by reporters has had on malfeasance. Choice A, B, and C are incorrect because they do not appropriately indicate the effect that would exposure by reporters had on malfeasance. It is unclear how journalism would act as a blockade to misconduct, and it's not idiomatic to say that these reporters have acted as an important interference to or drag on misconduct. So that word idiomatic, when it says drag on or interference to. Interference to malfeasance wouldn't be a good sentence, or drag on malfeasance wouldn't be a good sentence. But rebuke to malfeasance is a good sentence, and an important, rebuke to malfeasance is a good sentence. Interference to or drag on is kind of doesn't make sense when you're saying interference to and condemnation of, drag on or rebuke of. So kind of tough. Might as well just finish this. You know what? We'll just at least do 40 and 42. While worrisome, the decline of traditional print media could not entail the end of investigative journalism. Which choice most effectively suggests that the end of investigative journalism is a real possibility, but that can be prevented? So if we can get this one right, I know we're all tired. This could be the last question of the night. Which choice most effectively suggests that the end of investigative journalism is a real possibility, but one that can be prevented? While worrisome, the decline of traditional print media could not entail the end of investigative journalism, need not entail the end of investigative journalism, will not entail the end of investigative journalism, or must not entail the end of investigative journalism. We're saying a real possibility, but one that can be prevented. So it's a real possibility, but can be prevented. So could not entail the end of investigative journalism. It could not entail. That means it's not a possibility. Will not entail. That means it's not a possibility. Need not entail. That means it could be a possibility, but it's not definite. And then must not entail means that it's definitely not a possibility, right? So the answer's got to be.
So need not.
It's got to be need not entail. All right. So I think this was a excellent lecture. We went over a lot of them. I think the most difficult ones are the ones that ask you where the sentences logically fit and such. So I always tell people to go after the low-hanging fruit. And what I mean by the low-hanging fruit is the easy questions, the ones that are just asking you to put sentences in place grammatically to make sure you're using positives correctly and things like that. There's a lot that we learned from today, just 2 thoughts that we can step away with. One, like I always say, in English, the correct answer is the most concise, as long as it's grammatically correct. We learned about how to use positives. So Andrew, comma, who's tired, comma, is still teaching, right? Andrew, who is wearing a comma, who is wearing a red shirt, comma, is about to have dinner, right? These are like statements that are surrounded by commas that are positives. And then the last thing we learned, and this was a tough thing, was the idea of a comma splice, which we cannot have. We're not going to have a comma in between 2 independent clauses, 2 statements that could stand alone as sentences. Andrew is wearing a red shirt, comma, he is about to have dinner. You cannot have a comma right there because they're 2 independent clauses. You would have to say, Andrew is wearing a red shirt, period. Andrew is wearing a red shirt, maybe semicolon, maybe something that would be appropriate in between 2 independent clauses. So I know that most of the focus so far has been on math, and Jesse will be back next week. Hopefully we'll continue with math, but you know, the test is a lot of reading too, and make sure that you go over these problems and you practice and you do very well on them. So thank you all so much for joining me tonight.